Okay. First question. What is the company you work for right now?
Company I work for? Wow, that's a tough question to answer because I actually work for 3.
Amen.
I teach for Webster University, so I teach space systems there. I actually have class tomorrow night on orbital mechanics, how you move things around in orbit, how you get things into space, and how you do go to other planets and things like that. I also teach at Colorado Technical University. I teach algebra and science sometimes physics. Next term I'm actually teaching a science class that has a lab, so that's going to be kind of fun. It's always good to get in the lab and break things and blow things up. So, and next term, which starts in 2 weeks, I'm going to be teaching trigonometry, which I haven't taught. You guys all got okay faces with trigonometry. Most of the time I say trigonometry and most people go, oh God. But that's good. Have you guys all had trig?
I have.
Same here. Agree.
Yeah, good. So you know about the unit circle and all that.
Yeah,
stuff.
favorite. Degree angles, yes.
And then I also teach at Pikes Peak Community College. I teach technical writing down there. So it's important to have skills not only in the hard sciences, it's also important to be able to communicate well, because that's an important part of what you're going to be doing as an engineer. My background is I was in the Air Force for 20 years. I served in the Air Force for 20 years, and I got to do some really cool things. I got to launch a rocket out of Cape Canaveral in Florida. I got to go to Afghanistan in 2004 and 2005. That was a fun experience. I got to teach at the Air Force Academy. I taught at the Air Force Academy for 8 years. Out of that career, I was teaching in the Department of Astronautics, which is space systems, astronautical engineering. And I also got stationed at Air Force Research Lab down at Kirtland Air Force Base, where I got to work on, well, by that time I was a major, so I actually had to lead people, so I didn't get to do a whole lot of the fun hands-on stuff. But I had people working on space power systems, solar cells, structures. We actually made our own tanks and payload-bearing structures and things like that. We did vibration absorbers. We did deployable telescopes, attitude control, and one other that I'm forgetting. So anyway, that's my background. So any other questions? Did that answer your question?
Yeah.
You have a long question.
How many hours a week do you usually work?
Oh goodness. As a teacher, every day, 7 days a week. As a teacher, it's really how much time you want to put into preparing, but I personally think a good rule of thumb is I like to prepare at least 2 hours for every hour that I teach in class. So like tomorrow night I have a 4-hour class, so that means I like to put in 8 hours of work to get into that, to get prepared for it. So typically I teach, right now I'm going to be teaching 3 classes at CTU and 1 at Webster, so those are 3-hour classes. So if I'm teaching about 20 hours a week, I'm working at least 40, if not more. But that's unique to teaching. You have to understand that's not really engineering so much. It's teaching engineering, but as an engineer in the Air Force, I work typically 40 to 50 hours a week.
For the job in the Air Force for engineering, what does the average day look like?
The average day, depended on what I was doing. When I was in a station at Los Angeles, my average day was coming in and working with the contractor. It really depends on the job, but I was working a lot with the contractor because they build a rocket called the Titan IV rocket, which is a huge booster rocket with 2 solid rocket motors on the side, and it has 3-stage liquid fuel in the middle of it. And it was a huge rocket. It's about 270 foot tall, payload fairing alone, not to mention the rocket
Yeah.
size. And we launched this huge payload. It was a classified payload that we launched on top of it. So when I was up in the process of getting ready to launch, it was again 40 plus hours a week to get ready for that cycle. When I was in a typical job, just working, for example, I worked a little while on the Cassini mission. You guys heard of the
Oh, yeah.
Cassini mission? You
Yeah.
have? What do you know about it?
What's the origin of that? I haven't heard of like this mission.
Yeah, it was a mission to Saturn, actually. We have a probe out at Saturn right now, and I worked on that a little while. And it would be typically come in. I worked a lot with NASA at the time on that, so I would come in and do telephone calls. I traveled a lot to go to different places where NASA had their expert engineers working on various aspects of it. But the Cassini mission to Saturn was interesting because in order to get from the Earth to Saturn, it takes a really long time. It takes like 11 years. And we didn't want to wait 11 years. So what we do is we do what's called a gravity assist. A gravity assist is you fly by another planet and it gives you a little boost, a little gravitational boost to get you further out. So the Cassini mission on the way out did a swing by of Venus twice. It flew by Venus, then it flew by Earth, and it got a little boost from Earth, and it flew by Jupiter, and it got out to Saturn in about 6 years versus 11 years that way. And the other thing we were interested in is one of Saturn's moons is called Titan, and it's very unique. It's very unique in that it's a lot like the Earth. It has oceans and lakes and even rain sometimes. The only difference is it's not water that's raining, it's methane and ethane. So it's a fascinating little moon. Fascinating, not so little, but it's a fascinating moon of Titan, called Titan, that we're also very interested in. We have probes out there now, so that was a typical 40-hour workday. Teaching at the Air Force Academy was as much time as it took, because not only do you have to teach, you have additional responsibilities like do this with the cadets, or I was the OIC of, actually, is that Japanese on the walls?
I think it is.
Yes.
Yeah.
I was the OIC of a Japanese Karate Association for a little while I was doing that, so that took some time. So that was a typical workday. I can't really say typical workdays like this and this and this. It really depended on the circumstances.
So would you be working on only one project at a time, or would there be times when you had several projects going on that would require different work?
Oh, definitely several projects. One thing that I forgot to mention is when I was a lieutenant, I got to work in an engineering role in the Air Force for the Aerospace Corporation, and I worked on 2 or 3 different projects during that time. One of the projects I worked on was before satellite launches, you have to have a good idea of what weather is, because you want to make sure it's not too windy or you don't have lightning or anything like that. So one of the things I worked on was how to model the weather patterns, especially the lateral winds, winds going horizontally like this, because launch vehicles are designed to take a lot of stress going straight up and down like this. They're not designed so much to take a lot of stress like that. So if you have wind coming up and impacting it, especially if you have a really large payload in there, satellite in there, it can certainly bounce it around a lot. So I got to work as a lieutenant, as an engineer for a year in a program called Education with Industry. So even if you do go in the military, you can work as a civilian, as an engineer through that program.
Sorry, I don't know
That's
if you
pretty
said, but what was your major in?
Mechanical engineering. Mechanical engineering. Yeah, I didn't say that. And the Air Force paid for my bachelor's degree and my PhD. So it was an excellent way to get schooling paid for. I did ROTC.
Right. If you don't mind me asking, how long did that take you?
My PhD?
Yes.
3 years, because I was only given 3 years.
Oh, good. Because I was about to say, well, if they're giving you that opportunity, if they are restricting you and telling you how much time you have as well as the expense, then I thought there will always be a cutoff period. But that makes sense, they gave you 3 years.
3 years, yeah. And I did it in 3 years because that's